I don't know about you, I'm positively sweltering.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And I've actually closed the window in this room because it can be a little bit noisy. So it's
Same here.
gradually turning it into an oven.
I know, and it's not like I'm not going to generate a lot of hot air. So, I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. I'm joined today by Steve Hunt, host of the Boxing Movie Podcast. He's a very welcome return guest, here to talk about one of his absolute favourite films, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which is also one of my favourite films, made by one of our favourite filmmakers, Dario Argento. In this case, though, Steve has a really close personal connection, one that is pretty much unique in my experience of guests on this podcast. But I'm going to let him tell you all about that. So let's jump right in and talk about The Bird with Crystal Plumage, or as I call it back home, L'uccello dalle piume di cristallo. We're not going to reveal who the killer is, but we are going to spoil a few of the set pieces from the film, and we're also going to talk about the novel on which the film was based, Fredric Brown's The Screaming Mimi, although it doesn't actually get any credit. But let's go see what Steve has to say about it right now. I hope he's not wearing one of those fedora hats with a great big knife stuck in it. Mr. Steve Hunt, welcome back to Tipping My Fedora. It's fantastic to have you here.
Well, I'm really pleased to be joining you again. I always feel a bit imposter syndrome, really, because your guests, I'm always so impressed with the quality of your guests and the qualifications of your guests, and I'm really just a fan.
Come on. I think that when I listened to what we talked about when we were talking about boxing movies, it's kind of like, I felt like a total wimp. I know nothing, because that's just movies. You know about the real life. You know about what it's like with real boxing champions.
We're not talking about boxing today, are we?
No, we're not. That is true. So, okay. So the reason we're talking about what we're talking about is because of the poster that all the people who are listening to this podcast can't see, but you can. Because yes. I have a poster of Cat o' Nine Tails, the 1971 Dario Argento film. And you saw that. And you said, wow, you're a Dario Argento fan. I said, yes, I am. And you did something that no podcast person has ever done in the history of podcasts. You took your clothes off. So
that's not entirely true.
Okay, so let's. You are close to Bird with the Crystal Plumage, the film we are discussing, in an unusual way. Please explain to our listeners how close you are to this film.
Well, depending upon what I was wearing on that particular day. I mean, today, as it's baking hot weather today, I don't have to do it. There's no clothing removal required because I've got a Bird with the Crystal Plumage tattoo on my forearm. So maybe if it was colder, I can't remember when we were speaking, I might have had to roll a shirt up. But there would have been no removal of clothing. It's not that type of web conversation that we were having. So I'm a fan of Dario Argento, and I wanted to get a tattoo to say that, really. And so I was looking for the right type of image, and the Bird with the Crystal Plumage image seemed to work well. And so that's what I've got.
It's the one from the main poster, isn't it? From the movie poster.
Yes,
so when did you do that?
Oh, it can't be that long ago, because I mean, I only really became a fan of Dario Argento and familiar with a lot of his work not that long ago. I went on a crazy binge of Blu-ray buying and stuff during the pandemic when we couldn't do much else. So I was trying to think earlier, but I think that's probably about the time when I really started trying to get my hands on everything. And so it wouldn't have been before then. So I think it was possibly around that time.
And what was your first Argento movie, dare I ask?
I imagine it was Suspiria, just because it's the most famous one. I do remember coming across him in the first instance because I used to listen when Mark Kermode was on the radio as opposed to selling out and going private. Disgraceful for an old Marxist, as he,
but there you go.
he obviously, in his film criticism, would occasionally reference Argento. So it was a name I would hear, but never knew really what was meant by that. So I can't remember specifically what triggered me to take that further. But I would have bought the Blu-ray, and then speculatively, and then gone the whole way really with buying almost everything I could get my hands on.
Bird with the Crystal Plumage is a film that I think fits in well with the kind of crime mystery noir elements that we explore on this particular podcast, although it is a scary movie, I think. So I hope we'll get a chance to talk about that aspect of it too. Let's dive in. So can I quickly ask you to give us, because this is something you do on your podcast, which is the Boxing Movies podcast, can you tell us a little bit about the plot of Bird with the Crystal Plumage?
Yeah, sure. So you've got Sam Dalmas, who's the lead character, played by Tony Musante. He's an American writer living in Rome on a temporary basis to try and find inspiration. He's been clearly a frustrated writer. It's not quite worked out the way he would have hoped, but he's getting some kind of bog standard type work to tide him over. Then one evening, walking home, he witnesses in an art gallery across the street what he thinks is a knife attack on a woman. And then that scene in particular, which I hope we come back to because it's such an amazing scene. After that, the police suspect that the perpetrator of that attack is a serial killer already guilty of the murders of several women. Sam is initially potentially a suspect, but then cleared. And then he gets involved in trying to solve the case while being troubled that his memory might be somehow letting him down or playing tricks on him. And then lots of chaos ensues, basically.
The plot is, on the one hand, what most people would definitely think of as being a giallo. Now, okay, giallo is an Italian term for murder mysteries, and just because they used to be published, well, in fact still are, published in yellow covers by the Mondadori group. And they do a lot of reprints in Italy, and in the same way that the Série Noir books that published from 1945 onwards in France have black covers. But yellow is just a way of identifying a kind of, it could just as easily be an Agatha Christie. Yeah. But when it comes to movies, and you say the word giallo, of course, you have certain ideas in your head. So I was interested, as the non-Italian of us, what images does the giallo word or phrase conjure in your mind?
Black-gloved killers, convoluted plots, style over substance. But even as I say that, I don't say that as a criticism because I enjoy the fact that they're very stylish. A lot of dubbed films, if you watch them with the dub. And they're from that era. There were so many of them made in that handful of years, and an awful lot with animals in the title after taking inspiration from this particular film. Murder mysteries, relatively graphic violence, titillation in some. So yeah, those were the things I would think of when I first think of giallo movies, I guess.
Because they have this sort of slightly odd historical through line, because a lot of them, I think most of them, and certainly Bird with the Crystal Plumage, are in fact whodunits. They're kind of, from that point of view, it's all about who's the murderer. They kind of follow a kind of literary tradition. Obviously, we'll talk about the literary roots of this particular film. You have to bring all the suspects together and you are the murderer. It's not quite like that, but it's very close to it. And one of the things that this film does, and that you get in a lot of books of this type, is the double bluff ending, where you think you know who the baddie is and everything's been seemingly resolved, but actually it's not true. There's an extra twist, and in actual fact it's somebody else, and there's more to it. The black gloves and sort of fedora hat and the leather side of it, although sometimes it's a black trench coat, oddly enough comes more from Germany. It comes from the creamy films. I don't know how familiar you are with any of those. We mainly think of them as these Edgar Wallace adaptations that were made in Germany from the late 1950s and were hugely popular. and have this perverse way of translating England, because they're always usually set in London but filmed in Germany, and except it's Victorian London but in the 1960s, so it's sort of foggy and it's cobbled streets, and it's usually a Jack the Ripper type murderer or something very extravagant. So that had a big influence, and Bird with the Crystal Plumage drew on that influence. Was a German co-production. So it's one of these odd films where the leading actor is American, the leading actress is British, the main supporting cast is from West Germany, and they're all wandering around Rome for some reason, but there are some Italians there too, so that's cool. It draws on those influences, but also has a number of other things that seem very specific to Italian cinema, and it's definitely drawing to a certain extent on some of the films that Mario Bava had made. Have you seen some of Bava's films? I mean, I'm a big fan.
Yes, absolutely. Blood and Black Lace, I would say, is one of the 5-star giallos. Gialli.
That's right.
My awful pronunciations, embarrassed by your pronunciations, but it's not fair me going up against you on the Italian side of things.
No, you're just going to lose, so let's move on.
And of course his first one, The Girl That Knew Too Much, and then things like those later ones of Bava's, the one set on the island,
$5 for an August Moon, which is very 10 Little Indians, and then There Were None type storyline, not necessarily one of his best films. And then there's the one that has the brilliant millions of titles, which is known as Bay of Blood, although one of the alternates is Twitch of the Death Nerve.
Death Nerve.
I love that title. Bizarre title.
Best title ever. Yeah.
But he brings a very kind of almost a fantastical sense to his films. He has this amazing use of color, except for obviously The Girl Who Knew Too Much, which was American co-production and which was shot in black and white. But all the others are in color and look extraordinary. In this film, I think that benefits a little bit from that in the sense that there's focus. But this is Argento making his directorial debut. But he'd written over a dozen films already. He was previously a journalist with a actually left-wing newspaper called The Paese Sera, which me and my dad used to read, in Italy in the 70s. It was what you read if you were left-wing. And he wrote for it. And then he started writing screenplays. And he was literally, I think he had 12 credits on films released between 1967 and 1970, which is amazing. Often co-writing credits. But, with Italian films, you tend to have all the credited writers. So it's quite often you get half a dozen easily. So this was a busy guy on the make. His dad, Salvatore Argento, was a film producer, so that helped, of course. But here he makes his debut. Now, the origins of the film are a little bit strange. Apparently, Bernardo Bertolucci, who is a friend of Argento's and a collaborator with him because they were working for Sergio Leone on Once Upon a Time in the West, he was trying to make a film of this 1949 novel called The Screaming Mimi by Fredric Brown, who is a fabulous writer, not especially well known and wasn't then, but who was known both for writing mysteries and science fiction, and was very prolific in the 40s and 50s especially. He wrote hundreds of short stories, and in one collection called Nightmares and Giesenstacks, actually collected over 24 short stories. Some of them are less than a page long. They're like elaborate jokes sometimes, or puns. And he is someone who delighted in wordplay. A fascinating writer. Bertolucci had come across this book. It had been published in Italy by Mondadori, I think. And he was trying to get a film made, and he couldn't quite crack it. Couldn't get it done. Bertolucci, I think, was a fan. He was also trying to get Hammett's Red Dust made, and he couldn't get that done either. So there you go. Ought for two. But Argento was inspired by the book, having it had passed on to him by Bertolucci. And there are a lot of elements from that book in Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Now, at my suggestion, you went and read the book. First of all, can I just ask you, what did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. It's a fun read, and it's interesting to see what Argento has taken from it. It's interesting that in the early days, apparently Argento didn't credit it as an inspiration, which is, I can't believe, that would have been, I don't know what the situation was legally back then, but there's no mistaking huge chunks of the book are taken for inspiration. Obviously, Argento uses an awful lot of his own stuff as well, but it's unmistakable that the basis of the book comes from there into the film. I really enjoyed the book. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about how the book pans out?
Yeah, would you? I mean, because it's a genuine noir story. It's a very dark book in lots of ways, I think.
Yeah.
In a way, almost darker than the film.
Yeah. So the book is set in Chicago as opposed to Italy. Our protagonist is a guy called Sweeney, who's a journalist and a man with a drink problem. And he wakes up coming out of a drinking binge and staggering along. He witnesses the aftermath of an attack on a woman, also behind a glass door, but different from the Bourbon Crystal Plumage, because he doesn't actually see the interaction between perpetrator and victim. He just sees the aftermath of this crime, and it has a huge impact on him. Essentially, this woman's clothes are pulled off by her pet dog. And anyway, he decides then to investigate this crime he discovers as he sobers up. The police suspect that this attack was, again, part of a series of murders, and this woman is the first to survive. And there's a lot of overlap. In the Bourbon of the Crystal Plumage, there's a painting, which is a crucial plot device. In the book, there is a statue, which is called the Screaming Mimi. It serves the same purpose as a plot device. So there's a lot of kind of similarities and overlaps, but there's an awful lot that's added as well by Argento when it comes to the film.
You hadn't read anything by Fredric Brown before, had you? No. Yeah, he's one of those authors. He had there was a real burst of interest, a renewed interest in his work in the 1980s, which is when I got into his stuff. And a number of kind of limited edition books were put out which collected a lot of his kind of pulp short stories. But in fact, it's a bit annoying because sometimes this book, the original book, is referred to as being a pulp book, but it isn't. It was a mystery that came out by Dutton, a completely legitimate publisher. It came out in hardback, and it was part of a contract he had with them for a number of books. And he was actually an author on the rise. His books are being very well reviewed. He recently won the Edgar for the best crime mystery of the year, a new author. And that was a book called The Fabulous Clip Joint, which is Chicago. So again, Chicago was quite important to Brown. Bourbon of the Crystal Plumage, or as we say in Italian, L'uccello dalle piume di cristallo, is all set in Rome, or is it? Well, it isn't actually. One of the things about it's supposed to be Rome, but it's this slightly fictionalized Rome. There's a sequence earlier on, for instance, when they go to the racetrack, and and the killer is following this woman who will become a victim in the storyline, and that was actually shot in Naples, for instance.
I've run through it over and over again. I can't get it out of my head, but I can't manage to pin it down either.
He isn't even Italian, and you're making him risk his life. Somebody's already tried to kill him once.
Julia.
And what makes you so sure they won't try again? You're blackmailing him. Look out behind! Ah!
Because a lot of comparisons are made with Hitchcock, I think it's probably useful to look at how some of those overlap, because certainly voyeurism in Hitchcock is a big deal. And here we start off right away with photographs that are being taken secretively, aren't they? And then the killer, who again is wearing, of course, the classic get-up, the leather gear, the gloves, and you never see the face, making these very detailed plans on following the designated victim. The various people who are getting knocked off, one of the issues is kind of Ripper-style killings because they seem unconnected. So we start with that, and then we go on to Sam Dalmas, and then we get to that first set piece. And again, set piece cinema, again, an idea very much that you associate with Hitchcock. And here we get to this utterly brilliant set piece. I think if Argento had never made anything else, it would still be this totally fantastic sequence. So describe it for us. What's actually happening in this sequence?
So he's walking along the street in the evening, and across the road, there's an art gallery that's completely glass fronted. It's like a foyer area, I guess you would call it. I don't know, it's probably not exactly the right word. And then there's another pane of glass which separates you from the actual gallery itself, the other side of that glass. And he witnesses a struggle between two people, and there's a knife involved, and there's blood involved. And then he runs across the road. He goes into this little foyer. The person with the dagger or the knife runs away out through a back door, and the woman, all dressed in white, collapses to the floor, and she's reaching out with her hand and screaming. And then the outer door of the gallery closes, so Sam Dalmas is trapped in this aquarium style arrangement. And the widescreen presentation of the movie just makes this perfect, because we see it's like it's almost presented like a play on stage, and he's watching. He's unable to do anything about it. He's unable to get any help, so he's fairly impotent in that situation, which again is a bit of a theme throughout the movie and some of Argento's movies. All he can do is try and attract passers-by and get someone to call the police. I don't know how much you want to give away in terms of spoilers.
If we can avoid it, let's try to. If we can't, we can't.
What's so genius about this might make me sound a bit of a ponce, so I hope it doesn't. But I was reading recently about the philosophy of phenomenology. Okay, have I gone too far down the ponce line? It's a German philosophy from about 100 years ago, and I'm no expert, but the very basics of that is where you are kind of describing phenomena without any preconceptions. So you're stripping away anything extraneous and saying or describing exactly what you're seeing. And the trap that Sam falls into is he tells the police what he thinks he sees. But if the police officer or Sam had actually been expert phenomenologists, Sam would have been able to say strictly what he had seen, which would have been more helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It makes sense to someone who's seen the film.
Yes.
Argento shows us stuff and shows Sam stuff, makes us make assumptions based on what people are wearing, based on gender, and so forth. But what Sam actually only sees is a struggle between two people and one person get injured.
That's right. And we see who she is, but we don't see who the other person is. One of the delights of that sequence is, of course, is that the proportions of that entrance to the gallery, this bizarre, although in fact for Italy at the time, not that unusual, believe it or not. Yeah, I've definitely seen lots of shops like that. The aspect ratio of the entrance is the aspect ratio of the film. It's 2:3:5 to 1.
Perfect. It's perfect.
That's Vittorio Storaro, who of course was just coming through and becoming this kind of genius of Italian cinema, who of course would work with Bertolucci, especially on films like The Conformist, The Last Emperor, Little Buddha, a film that tends to get overlooked, but I love that movie. And it's a beautifully shot sequence, but as you say, it's this sense of utter voyeurism and helplessness, because he's trapped between these two doors. So he's like us. We're trapped in our seats. We can only look, and he can't help, which is horrible. But then, when the police do arrive, and we get introduced to Enrico Maria Salerno, who is playing the detective, who has, for some reason, remarkably small moustache. I don't know why. It's almost like a joke moustache. I don't know
what is the point.
Exactly. It's like an accident, right? It's kind of like I didn't mean to shave it, and then, okay, I left a bit there until it grows back. It looks really bizarre, but okay. I guess it's chic. You know, he's a well-known actor. In fact, he was the voice of Clint Eastwood in the Dollars trilogy.
I did read that. Yeah.
So, you know, but he was a well-known actor and was coming through as a director as well. And he talks to Dalmas and is remarkably sort of nice, because I think, like you, in a way, it's great that you brought that up, because right away, I think the inspector has an instinct that something isn't quite right. And Dalmas says, there's something slightly wrong. I can't remember something.
And where were we, huh? There was something wrong with that scene. Something odd. I can't pin it down, but I have a definite feeling that something didn't fit.
Well, think about it. Try to isolate it.
I've tried. I can't pin it down.
Let's see if I can help. You saw someone run out of this door.
Yeah, but it was so dark under here. The door was almost
Don't touch anything.
And in fact, later on in the film, at various times, you will get these interesting sort of flashbacks, which are done almost as, and then it will start and then it will freeze frame. So he's almost like a filmmaker, of course, in that sense. He's trying to sort of almost rebuild it in his mind because the way he thinks he saw it isn't quite right. And so, in fact, the inspector ends up sort of tricking him and takes his passport off and says, "Oh, can I look at your passport?" And then just sticks it in a drawer.
Keeps it.
Okay, you're not leaving the country. So although he's just a witness, the implication is at the beginning that he might somehow be the guilty party and sort of got trapped while he was trying to run away. But she survives, of course, and she says right away, no, it was this guy wearing, of course, a hat and a coat and all in black, and I don't know who he was, and so I can't help you. But it definitely wasn't that guy. So he's just there to help out. So we get this literary idea of the amateur sleuth who's going to help the professional. In the original book, the Fredric Brown book, he's a sort of journalist and an alcoholic, and he's someone who makes this pact that, having seen the woman who's been stabbed and protected by this dog, and it turns out she's a stripper, and the dog is part of her act because he pulls away the layers of her clothing within limitations. This is the late 1940s. You'd have got raided if you'd taken more than a certain amount off. He makes this pact that basically he's going to spend the night with her. So he's going to work really hard to try and be heroic. Now, this turns out to be an example of Fredric Brown's wordplay, because he does literally get to do that, but it doesn't have the same meaning he thinks it does. Now, this is where the book is bleaker, darker, noir. He knows it's kind of not very pleasant man. He's, again, problems with drinking and so on and so forth. And he has a very, very bizarre motivation and is part of a worldview that is really quite bleak. But the plot is kind of the plot of Bird with the Crystal Plumage. In terms of the presentation, though, it couldn't be more different. This doesn't feel like gritty Chicago at all.
I think, interestingly, I think that the difference between the statue in the book and the painting in the film illustrates clearly the difference between the two, because the statue is just a statue. Although it's a statue of a woman in fear, it's not nearly as explicit as the painting, which is pretty obscene. And I think that tends to highlight for me the difference between the book and the film. In the book, I don't think any murders take place actually within the time frame of the book. The murders have happened beforehand. Whereas obviously in the film, Dario's got to give us plenty of kills.
He does. And so we get additional set pieces. I mean, one of them is, so the woman that got followed at the racetrack and then goes home, and it's one of these brilliant, beautifully shot sort of stalking sequences where every now and then somebody will creep into the frame and say, oh, damn, she's being followed. She even sort of goes and has a quick chat with a policeman, and they just have a nice, hello, good, nice evening. And then the camera keeps going. All of a sudden, oh no, there's somebody there. So all of a sudden, it's not just a regular scene. And then you see her, and she goes home and gets into the most ridiculous night you've ever seen in the universe. You don't understand what the point of it is, but never mind. And she's there having a cigarette in bed, as you do before going to sleep in 1970. You get a point of view shot, right, which is just brilliant, where she sort of, you see her hand with the cigarette. She's looking at the bottom of the room, which is the doorway, looks away to put the cigarette out. The camera comes back, and it's
Black Glove Killer.
It's the killer. And then it all gets extremely nasty and very Freudian.
Yeah.
And is, in fact, I think the nastiest moment in the film, in fact.
Easily,
yeah. You don't see a lot, but the implication is very unpleasant. And so you get that. But yes, that's that thing, isn't it? That it was shot in 1969. And I think they just weren't going to be as explicit. It would have got censored and it would have been in the film. So I think and maybe Argento didn't feel confident enough, because this is still primarily a thriller, a whodunit. But this is the first time where we see something that's genuinely scary, because you also get that real bravura shot, which sounds ridiculous now because it's so exaggerated, but the camera, they used a micro camera, so it's inside her mouth as she screams, and it pulls back, so you get a great view of her tonsils. But it sort of tries to give you the emotion of that moment. It's this kind of scream from inside. And in fact, it's on a lot of posters, isn't it? The kind of her face is being held by the black gloved killer. I think often turns up, but it's a very small role because she gets bumped off very early on, and that's over. And then Sam decides, okay, I'm stuck here, and his girlfriend, who's played by the lovely Susie Kendall, who did a number of films in Italy actually, but British actress, done a lot of stuff in the 60s, and she plays a model, I think, in the film, and I think that's where she was before she made the movie. Whereas the lead actor, of course, is Tony Musante, who's an actor who I don't know how well known he is now. At the time, he was on the up. He'd just made a film in Italy, Metti una sera a cena, which doesn't translate well at all, but has one of the most insistent Ennio Morricone themes you have ever heard. And I'll send you a link. You'll recognize it right away. You won't have seen the film probably, but you'll recognize the music. Musante and Morricone end up both, of course, working on this one. So it's the film they'd done just before. And I think that's kind of how Musante ended up in it. And obviously his family's originally from Italy. And he plays quite an interesting guy because he's mostly not fazed by things, is he? He just sort of gets on with it. He's not exactly a neurotic character, is he?
No, considering he does get given that passport back before too long, but he still decides to stay in Rome and try and catch this killer, when clearly the stakes are quite high and this killer has turned their attention to bumping off Tony Musante and potentially Susie Kendall. So, I would have been on the first plane out there and just phoned up
Inspector
Morosini later to find out if he caught him. But at least, like you're right in that Sam Dalmas's motivation for solving the crime is much more honourable than Sweeney's in the book. Sam Dalmas just wants to solve the crime, doesn't he? He just wants. He knows he's seen something and he wants to solve it. But he does put himself in crazy risks. And his girlfriend.
Yeah, and his girlfriend, because there's a scene where somebody tries to get him with a hatchet. And again, it's one of those things that seems a bit like a creamy film because he's wandering around Rome, which suddenly becomes completely fog-bound. And isn't it great? It's fake fog in movies always makes it look like there's a gigantic fire going on because it's not fog, it's smoke. It makes no sense.
And the other thing I noticed or realised when I was watching it this time, when that hatchet hits that pipe, I don't know many pipes outside just random brick walls. The water spurts out of that pipe, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's an unusual type of pipe. It's not like a drain pipe, is it?
It's not a drain pipe. It's an actual water pipe, which again makes no sense whatsoever.
That's at all. No.
But it looks great, though, doesn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Which is all that matters.
And also, he gets some bloke comes after him. Some person comes after him with a hatchet. And when he then goes trying to chase the guy with the hatchet.
I know, he just gets up and then the hatchet person gets in a car and drives off. And he's kind of like, oh, well, thanks. And the woman who sort of, it's a nice shot, isn't it? Because he doesn't get his head cut off because this passerby warns him and he sort of ducks. And he says, oh, it's okay. Thanks very much. And wanders off. It's got, I don't think
go and see Susie Kendall now.
Yeah. Well, fair enough, right? Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
On the other hand, poor Susie Kendall, she gets one of the real kind of horror-tinged type sequences when she's being, I don't know how convincing this is, but just when they're about to leave, he gets a clue. So he has to go. So he's going to leave her, and there's police out the front. We never actually find out what happens to them. Instead, the killer arrives and starts thumping on the door, and she can't get out. She sort of, there's this horrible way that, none of the windows open. And, she's at the top of this building, and it's a bizarre-looking building. Again, not weird for Italy, actually. It's some sort of... You have to assume it's a kind of loft, but in Italy this was actually very common because often you would have places like that built into buildings, and it would actually be where sometimes there were like communal spaces where people would go and do the washing because
Right.
people didn't have their own washing machines, for instance. So originally they were built so they could go there and do the washing and hang stuff and then leave, so but then eventually, of course, they got turned into, got used for living quarters. And that's a very extended sequence and is certainly it seems to me, the first horror set piece in that sense, because it's just about scaring you, isn't it? It's just about making you feel fear.
As a set piece, I prefer the one we were just talking about, where the woman gets followed home and attacked, because I just think Susie Kendall, she is locked in that apartment and seems relatively safe, and she does kind of have a bit of a meltdown. She's a bit wishy-washy. I know there's a killer trying to get into a
harsh.
But well, I don't know. Yeah,
well,
it's good.
No. I know what you're saying, absolutely, because she has definitely not signed on for this, right? The other person's a victim. She gets killed quite quickly. It's done in a startling fashion, but it's over really very fast. There's a lot of build-up, but ultimately, once the killer arrives, he dispatches her quite quickly, and that's all. Here, you spend a lot of time with her screaming, and I suppose that's kind of what I meant, that it feels like a horror set piece in that sense, because it's all about the emotion of fear and just this horrible sense of threat. Not necessarily my favorite sequence in the film either, and it's cross-cut with this, again, one of these moments in the film, because it's full of eccentric characters, which is kind of great. And in that sense, although it's not like the book, the book has a rather eccentric tone, and so you get these very curious and often very funny subsidiary characters. So you get this guy who, I think he's supposed to be a pimp, and he goes to see him in prison a couple of times, and he's an actor who turned up and worked with Argento 3 times in total, and there's quite a fun interview with him on the I think the Blu-ray both have the Arrow release, which does look amazing, and recommend to anybody to go get it. And he had a kind of short career, I think he was in films for about 6 years, and that was it. So there's that, and then you get the owner of the kind of antiquarian shop, who's played by Werner Peters, who's again one of the German actors, and you get he's slightly camp, and weirdly that seems to be the only thing that slightly scares Sam Delmas. He gets a little bit kind of, let's not dig too deep into that. It doesn't say a lot for Sam, but he finds him a little bit threatening. And he's the kind of actor who turned up in tons of German movies. He was very, very popular. And then we get the painter, and the painter is played by Mario Adorf, who has been in so many films, it's unreal. He's just one of these international actors. He's not even a German actor anymore. He just turns up all over the shop, and he plays the guy who painted this picture, which it turns out has set the whole plot in motion. But he turns out to be this bizarre character who's walled himself in, won't let people come in and see them unless he likes them, and then it turns out has extremely strange eating habits. I don't know if we're really prepared to discuss that on the podcast, but let's put it this way: we're all cat lovers here, and Mario isn't.
Well, he is.
He really loves cats. Yeah. But we also get a nice homage to Hitchcock. Having talked about Hitchcock sequences, we do get the actor Reggie Nalder, who had played the assassin in The Man Who Knew Too Much, the 1956 version, and who here turns up playing an assassin who tries to shoot our hero, mostly around a bus depot, or a coach depot, I should say. And he's got this very bright yellow jacket, and he's sort of chasing him around different parts of Rome, and doesn't get him, because you get into a sequence which is super Hitchcockian, I think, which is that he goes into, it's the one boxing reference in the film. So I wanted to get your opinion on this. I
don't think that's going to justify me covering this film in my podcast, but I'd love to, and we can have this discussion all over again. So he's wearing this yellow leather jacket, and when the tables are turned and Tony Musante starts chasing him, he disappears into this building, some kind of hotel, I think it is, probably in a convention room. And Sam thinks he's going to find this villain who's been trying to kill him, goes into this hall, and there is a convention of ex-boxers going on, and all of them are wearing this yellow leather jacket. So it becomes that's the joke, that it's impossible to find this guy amongst that crowd. I have to say that scene, it does seem like it's airlifted in from another movie, to be fair to me, because the villain of the piece, the true villain of the piece, why would they hire a hitman?
Oh, it's not logical enough for you, Steve. Well,
no, look, this is why.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love Argento, because I can veer between thinking that is ridiculous, or that is, some parts of the acting I might think, oh, that is awful, but I can't help myself loving it. This is illogical, isn't it? It's illogical.
It is,
but it doesn't matter. For me, it does not detract from the movie. I just find it funny and enjoy it.
Yes, you could probably find a way to justify it, but it does seem absurd. I mean, it's like basically Jack the Ripper finding that when somebody's on his tail, he decides to go and hire somebody else to take out the person who's after him because he's too busy killing people, Yeah. I was busy that Tuesday, so I couldn't do it myself,
Yeah, and they better do the job properly or I'm going to kill the hitman.
Because in fact, the hitman gets knocked off. Spoiler warning, I guess. It is a little peculiar. It looks incredible, and one of the scenes that comes up towards the end is one of the ones that to me seems the most overtly noirish. I mean, we have a number of fascinating death and suspense sequences. There's amazing shot with a camera that literally I think they just threw out of a window and flies down about 4 stories to show a character being thrown from a window, which is something else taken directly from the book. But then we get a sort of solution to the plot. Sam's got it figured out, goes to the location, finds the link to the eponymous bird with the crystal plumage, which is a great touch. It's a completely made up bird, but it totally works in the film, which is great. It's even given a totally bogus sort of Latin name, which I think is great. And
I love that. I'm not going to give it away, but how that links to identifying the killer is again.
It's great.
Mad.
It's mad, but it's kind of great. I mean, also because the way they do it, the way they present science in the film, and it's kind of like, you get the specialist with the computers, and
I love those.
And he wears he's got these sunglasses on the entire time. I mean, that's so Italian.
And those computers, what is it? I think Honeywell 1200. I don't know, and that surely wasn't a real. I know Honeywell was a real computer name company.
But yeah, I have
those
no
computers
idea.
Can't have been legitimate.
I kind of love it, and I love this kind of like you get this sort of outline of the murderer based on the data that they filled in. It's just this dot matrix, kids drawing. And it's kind of like, yeah, that's really going to help me find the person in question. Thanks a bunch, which is bizarre. So we've solved the case, and it's somebody unexpected, but that is logical. We don't entirely, but eventually they confess, and so you've kind of tidied things up, and then Sam has to deal with something else because his girlfriend's gone missing. Susie Kendall is nowhere to be found. Something's going on, and he hasn't been able to resolve that nagging feeling that he missed something, because it's been coming back to us the whole time, the little flashbacks, the little sense of what am I not seeing. And so there's this very strange sequence where he wanders around parts of Rome, sort of trying to somehow magically retrace the steps.
Some great shots in there as well, by the way, isn't it?
Well, that's what I was going to say. There are these fantastic shots where, I mean, partly it's just wonderful for me as, a Roman born and bred, just to see those parts of town, which I totally recognize. And it's just gorgeous. It's beautifully shot. And then you get a big reveal. And what is, I think, a big surprise. I think as someone, when I saw it first and I hadn't read the book, it was a big surprise. I didn't see it coming. And I thought, no, that works. Again, because also you're presented with, which makes no sense, but you're seemingly presented with, oh no, it was this person. And then it turns out, no, they're yet just another victim. Makes no sense. Yes, you
Yeah.
prop them up and put them up in position so they look like they're the bad guy for no reason whatsoever. And then we get to a chase sequence, and there is this fantastic shot when he chases after the leather-clad villain and goes into this room, and it's this completely dark room.
Pitch black, yeah.
And then opens the door, and there's a sort of yellow backing behind. So all you see in the bottom left-hand corner of this very wide screen, you see just him coming through the door.
Yeah,
and it looks amazing. And it's extraordinary, very noirish in that sense, beautiful. And then you get a close-up. And then by this point, the film has become literally dark, of course. We're basically at night now, I think. Very impressively done. And then we reach to an ending that takes us back to the beginning, certainly to the location of the beginning.
Yes.
One of the aspects of this, him trying to piece it all together, to me, it reminded me of Blow Up, the Antonioni film. Is there something in this photo? And I can't quite see it. And then, De Palma elaborated on that in Blow Out. I suspect that must have been a bit of an influence. And certainly when Argento went to make what may or may not be his best film, Deep Red, he hired David Hemmings, the star of Blow Up, to do it. Finally, the pieces come together, and so we know what he's missed, at which point he gets attacked by a gigantic piece of art and is once again made... Well, he becomes null again. He has no agency whatsoever. He's literally impotent. He's immobilized.
Trapped,
yeah. And I think that gives it great symmetry. And I love that.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
And
I haven't got anything to add on to that, really, because I think you put it perfectly, but it perfectly mirrors the beginning of the film. It's a great reveal. It's shot marvelously. Yeah, and it wraps things up well.
For all I know, the way he looks after her, you'd think a bosom was something unique.
Ripper versus Stripper. Now a shiver of anticipation runs through you. Now a quiver of fear. Over 5 million read the novel about the striptease murders. Now see it come stabbingly alive on the screen.
Have you seen the 1958 version of the adaptation of the book?
No, I think it might have even been you that said to me that it's not that great.
No, it's not.
I didn't seek it out.
So in fact, we probably, if I'm not, unless we're going to sit here and mock it, it's probably not. But there was a genuine 1958 version. It stars Anita Ekberg and Gypsy Rose Lee, in fact. They weirdly screw it up. It's weird. It's the official version. This one is much better. So I don't know quite what happened there. They made some odd decisions. Looking at it in retrospect, it's 55 years later now. And Argento is still with us. His last movie came out 3 years ago. He's still working. How do you think it sits within his body of work as a fan? What do you think of it? Where do you place it amongst his other work?
I think it's right at the top. I think there's a small number of his films I find hard to separate. Bird with Crystal Plumage, Deep Red, Suspiria, Tenebrae. I even like Cat and Nine Tails, which I know a lot of people don't put up there as one of the best, but I really enjoy it. I find it hard to separate those. So I think it's top drawer. I know I've heard some people say that it's where he's kind of developing ideas that he goes on to develop further later on. But for instance, the scene that we were talking about where he's trapped and he's watching this initial attack, and what did I see? Did I my memory's playing tricks on me? That type of thing, that he goes to do something similar in Deep Red. I think I actually prefer this one, which probably isn't the most common feeling. I love what happens in Deep Red, and there is a similarity, of course. But I think the way this scene is done, I think I prefer. So yeah, I would say it's amongst my favourite even now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, the so-called animal trilogy, which have nothing in common except that they've got animals in the title, and then of course they got ripped off for another 2-3 dozen films, all had some kind of title, and some of them are good and some of them are not. Most of them are not, in fact. But this was a big hit. I mean, I like Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which actually has a few other bits from the Fredric Brown novel that didn't make it. into this one, particularly the God character. There is this kind of, obviously it's one of the things that again appealed to Brown, so that he could say he was sitting there on a park bench talking to God. Actually, I don't know if you know about this, but I thought I'd add this. The original book actually had two endings. Brown wrote an alternative ending which he sent to his publisher. The assumption is that he never thought it would be accepted, so he did it kind of as a lark. But in his ending, that alternate ending, Sweeney gets killed and goes to heaven and sits on a park bench next to the real God. And the real God tells him, don't worry, the killer will be up here in about 2 years' time, but in the meantime, I've got lots of friends that you can hang out with, so you'll be fine. Honest to goodness, that was the last chapter of the book. Weirdly, it didn't get used, but he had a great sense of humor. Because it's quite a grim book in some respects, but that playfulness, he had remarkable kind of verbal and literary dexterity, was very punctilious about language. And as I say, a lot of his short stories, the really short ones, which are maybe one paragraph, they're kind of like a joke. They really are a joke, and you're just getting to the punchline, but they're in prose form. And he almost invented what is now known as the short. Whereas with Argento, his films kind of only got longer. I think this is maybe still his shortest movie, I suspect, or close to it. And I think had a big influence on Deep Red and Stendhal Syndrome as well, which is a film I do like. It's not as good, but I do like it. I do think, particularly the first half, is, I think...
That's 2 hours.
Oh yeah, sure. But it's another film that definitely has some influence from Fredric Brown. So it's interesting. It obviously had a big impact on Argento. Yeah, I'm always in two minds. For me, it's either this one or maybe Deep Red. I think somehow the weird thing about Deep Red for me is, because I know you were coming to this as someone who you were kind of a horror movie fan first, and then you kind of started looking at these films. I'm not especially a horror movie fan. I've seen a lot of them and I like a lot of them, but that's not my go-to genre. So much as I really appreciate the greatness of, say, something even like Inferno, it doesn't really do it for me. Suspiria, I feel, is just something magical and special. There's something truly extraordinary about that film. I'm very glad I've got to see it at the cinema with big audiences. It's a really good experience. It was actually a screening that was presented by the director Edgar Wright, who's a big fan, so that was really good. That was I guess probably pre-pandemic, but that was a really good experience. For instance, there are lots of things that I really like about all kinds of his films. On the other hand, I'm never going to want to watch his Dracula ever again. And I saw it okay without the 3D, but, or even his Phantom of the Opera. I don't quite understand what he was getting at.
Yeah, I've only watched those once.
Yeah, so, well, I think we've done our due diligence in that case. So, so we've talked a little bit about crime and horror, and we've talked about Argento and where this sits in his oeuvre, and the terrific Fredric Brown book. And obviously, I'll be glad to lend you any other Fredric Brown books if you're ever inspired to read more. I do basically have them all. I'm a huge fan.
I'll tell you one thing I like in this film, we've kind of touched upon it, and that runs through the Animal trilogy, is Argento's use of make-believe technology. So we talked about those crazy police computers and that bonkers printout that just shows a figure that could be anybody and is utterly useless, when they have actually got the glove that the killer left behind, which seems to be a fairly useful piece of evidence, even back in 1970. And then, of course, in Cat o' Nine Tails, it's all about this supposed gene that this company have discovered that will indicate whether you're going to be likely to be a criminal. I think that's essentially it. Yeah. Which obviously is utterly nonsense, but is absolutely crucial to the plot. And then in Four Flies on Grey Velvet, he takes it to another level, where essentially they come up with this technology where the last image that you see before you die is imprinted on your eye. And so they can extract that from your eye to help maybe reveal who the killer is.
It's been recently discovered that the last image seen by the victim before death is retained for several hours on the retina. It's a very difficult procedure, but it is possible to photograph this image. Experiments carried out in Germany, the United States, and more recently in Italy have had surprisingly good results. In some cases, it's even been possible to distinguish the murderer's face at the very moment he committed the crime.
Which is genius, but nuts. And in no surprise to say that that technology has not actually become reality in the intervening years.
No, I mean, the bizarre part of that is that that's was something that people thought was true, I think, of the 19th century. I mean, this is an ancient idea, and you can never back it up. Of course, in the film, it is given a wonderful visual flourish. That, you know, all of a sudden, you never understood what the damn title meant, and now I understand what the title means. So that's kind of fantastic. Sort of a bit like Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Oh, that's why it's called Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Okay, I get it. Four for Lies in Grey Velvet, same thing. And then you get this additional sort of sequence at the end. And it is that is a very kind of bleak film, actually. You know, I don't think happily married couples should watch it. You know, it's kind of a tough one. And in fact, you could argue that, you know, together with Bird with the Crystal Plumage, he doesn't have a lot to say about marriages that is particularly positive.
One other thing I'd just like to say is this is truly remarkable as a debut movie for a director, isn't it? He may have taken an awful lot of inspiration from the book, inspiration from the likes of Bava, but this is already straight out of the blocks, Dario Argento. You've already described some particular shots that we see. It's just wonderfully done. There's another shot where we've mentioned this painting is crucial to revealing the killer. Sam Dalmas gets a black and white photo of this picture and puts it up on his wall. They believe that the killer has got the original painting. We see the black and white painting picture on the wall of Sam's flat, and then it kind of changes to the color painting as we move into the killer's flat. And it's just things like that. You think that's like really clever and inspirational to me, you know, filmmaking that is remarkable for a guy making his first movie, and was lucky to be entrusted as a director, wasn't he? Because he nearly got fired and wasn't first in the queue to get the job in the first place.
He wasn't, no. It's because, again, he was just known as a screenwriter, and he just written it on spec, and then suddenly decided that he wanted to do it. And obviously his dad helped him out, but yeah, I think there was talk, because I don't think the producers were very happy about some of what he was doing, because it is very outre as well. I think even for a film from 1969, it's some of it is, it's a bit grim, a little bit dark, but also the camera work is very flamboyant already. And but in fact, that shot that you talk about, that painting shot, which is so interesting, because of course it's kind of like a trick shot. You know, you cut from, I think it's Susie Kendall who's looking at the wall, and you see the camera slightly zoom in, and it's this black and white, in essence, photo of the painting, and then the camera tracks back, and it's all an unbroken shot. And what they must have done was they had a shot of it in black and white, and basically they had to do a dissolve over that so that it would then cut to the material shot in color. And it's this great tracking shot, because it's this moment where you pull back, and then you see that the killer wearing the leather and the hat is just staring at that photo. Yeah, and it makes total sense in terms of the plot as we eventually understand it. So it's a very strong moment, but it's also this wonderful sense of there's this weird connection, right, between Sam Dalmas and his girlfriend and the killer. It works. It's just rendered visually so successfully, and it's very succinct, actually. And it's a film full of great ideas, full of great visual ideas. As I say, I think it starts off with this incredible set piece, but actually there are lots of others. And I think people should definitely watch beyond the first 10 minutes. And I think it totally pays off. Yeah, okay, he kind of nicked the plot from another book, and he does, but he does a really, really good job with it. And as you say, I think it was so successful and was ripped off mercilessly for the next 5-6 years, so that the whole kind of giallo genre, as we came to understand it, all comes from the success of this one film.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, really.
It is, yeah.
Dozens and dozens of films being made afterwards, all the books that have been written about it. Extraordinary. Well, on that note, Steve, before we go, I wanted to ask you one question. Is there a film that you have seen, particularly a film noir film, preferably, that you have seen recently that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Actually, yes, a film I really enjoyed and was a real surprise. And actually, I can recommend the film and the box set that it was part of. So I've been buying the Radiance World Noir box sets, and they're up to the 3rd volume at the moment. And I've just finished watching all 3 of the films in there. So I would recommend the box set most definitely. I enjoyed all 3, but the one I watched last was The Girl with Hyacinths, which I had never heard of before. I'd not heard of any of these films. I just bought the box set on the strength of it being noir and having enjoyed the first 2 box sets. And Girl with Hyacinths is a 1950 Swedish drama, and it is bleak but really enjoyable. It starts off with a woman that takes her own life, and then we go back in true kind of noir style through flashbacks to see different people's perspectives of this woman as a neighbor of hers tries to piece together why this woman took her life. And that's all I'll say about it. But it was, I really enjoyed it. It had me gripped. There's subject matter in there that I was stunned by, but pleased about to see in a film of that age. And yeah, it's just, I don't watch many Swedish dramas from 1950, so I love watching stuff a bit different. So I would highly recommend that film, and you can get it. I don't know whether you can get it separately from the box set, but the box set.
Not yet. No, you can't. No.
The box set, all 3 films I really enjoyed. Not a weak one among the 3.
I've got the box set, but I have not cracked it open yet. So I'm going to follow your advice and watch that one first. So thanks very much for being my guest again, Steve. It's brilliant to have you here. And let's remind everybody they should also be listening to your podcast. Remind us again about your podcast, please.
Yeah, so it's the Boxing Movie Podcast, which, as I always say, it might sound like the world's most niche subject, but it's not as niche as you might think. So I've covered everything from my most recent episode that I've put out was I think the Rocky 3 one.
Rocky 3 was brilliant.
But it's not all Rocky. I've covered silent Hitchcock movie. I've covered plenty of noir, because obviously boxing and noir go hand in boxing glove. Covered blaxploitation movies. So there's been boxing movies that cross the whole entire span of cinema, which is the joy of doing this podcast. And nearly always, boxing films aren't really about boxing. Even Rocky isn't really about boxing. So that's also the joy of covering these type of films. They're often like a snapshot of a period of time or a particular place, certain cultural issues. So yeah, it's an awful lot of fun. You were a guest, of course, on a discussion on $1 Million Baby, Snake Eyes. So that's my podcast, yes. And you can find that wherever.
Thanks very much, mate. Take care.
No problem. Bye.
You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix. And it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.